Yeah. Have you ever tried to get a customer, if you hand them a book and you're like, here, see if you'll be interested in this. Have you
Hmm.
ever told them to do the 69 test?
The what?
Okay. Bear with me here.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Season 3 finale of Misshelved. I'm your host, Nicole Brinkley, and in case this is your first episode, welcome. Every 2 weeks, I introduce you to an independent bookseller in conversation with an author they love. Now, we will be back for a Season 4, though it will be a little longer than 2 weeks, and that will be our last season for now. So if you are a bookseller and you want to get involved in Season 4, drop me an email. Let's make some stuff happen. It might come back at some point in the future. Who knows? Who's to say? The future is an enigma to us all. But what is not an enigma is this glorious Season 3 finale episode. This is probably one of my favorite conversations I've had on the podcast, though I feel like I say that every episode because it does always feel true. Our bookseller this week is Laynie Rose Rizer.
Hello, my name is Laynie Rose Rizer. I am the assistant store manager at East City Bookshop in Washington, D.C., and I'm also a BookTokker.
I first saw Laynie on TikTok and then got to know them through their work at East City Bookshop. You might remember Cecilia Cackley, a former East City Bookshop bookseller, being on the podcast in Season 1. Laynie is in conversation with the wonderful Margot Wood.
Hey, my name is Margot Wood. I'm the author of Fresh, and I also work in publishing.
Margot is also somebody I've known for a really long time in the digital book space, and these two have done an incredible deep dive into kind of the digital world of books and how we find recommendations and the expectations around these things. So settle in and listen as these two chat about all of that, and then we'll see you back in a few weeks for Season 4.
Incredible. Hello, my dearest Margot.
Hi, Laynie. I feel like I've known you forever, even though we've never met in person.
I know, isn't that so weird? Like, I feel like we've just been such good friends the entire time that we've, been on social media together. I mean, honestly, from the moment I feel like I heard about Fresh, I was like, this author and I would be friends.
So for those who are listening, the way that Laynie and I came to be friends is because Laynie got recommended Fresh by who recommended you my book?
I don't even remember, but I remember I was standing in a Shake Shack and my friend, I don't remember who it was, but someone texted me and was like, have you heard about this messy sapphic college book? And I was like, tell me everything immediately. And because I'm a bookseller, I could log into Edelweiss, which is like NetGalley for people in the industry or whatever. And I, within 5 minutes, had it downloaded.
Yeah. And then you posted a TikTok about it. And it was the first time anybody had posted about it on TikTok. And I was like, I was really scared to click on it. To be honest, I was like, oh no, this person has a lot of followers. Like, I'm really afraid that she's not going to like it. And then I watched it and I was like, oh my God. I sent it to every single one of my family members and they didn't know what TikTok was. And I had a whole day with that video.
I think you're also the first author that really interacted with my review of their book. So that was very exciting because I remember when you duetted my video and I saw your face, I was like, what? That's insane.
Oh man, worlds colliding. But then we've been friends ever since. But it's funny, I wonder how many people made new friends through TikTok and BookTok during the pandemic because it really became so popular during that era.
Right.
And have never met in person.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't start working at the bookstore until the pandemic because previously I worked in theater. And so I didn't meet anyone in the industry until the pandemic. So everyone's just been like little Zoom screens and little, Instagram DMs, and that's pretty much been it.
See, that's what I think is so interesting about like you and your account is that like you're still so new to the book community.
I'm so new.
You're so fresh. But it's true. Like you're so new to it. And I think that like you bring this energy that I hadn't seen in a really long time, to be honest, because I don't know, you breathed new life into the community.
That is so sweet of you to say. I mean, I really feel like for me, it's just that I have no idea what the industry was like beforehand, and I have no idea what BookTok was like beforehand, because my debut into BookTok was sort of the It's Gay and It Slaps audio. So, I've done a few like interviewee kind of things here and there, talking to people about BookTok and book selling, because I'm kind of the intersection between the two. And people always ask me like, oh, what was BookTok like beforehand? I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea.
It's really interesting because I've been in publishing since like 2009-ish. So I've seen the evolution of publishing from like early days of social media when it was mostly just Twitter and Facebook to then evolving into Bookstagram and then evolving into BookTube and like the rise of the YouTube book community. And then there was like a couple of years where like YouTube was sort of reigning over everything. And then all of a sudden, BookTok came out of nowhere. But I think what's the most interesting thing about BookTok is that for me, I think that's the first time I've really seen booksellers and like bookstores really also come into the social sphere of the book community. Because before that, it felt like it was obviously authors, readers, and publishers. But now I'm seeing way less publishers. I mean, I know they're on BookTok, but they just don't dominate in the way that they used to previously, like on social. So it's really interesting to see how the conversation has shifted, especially as booksellers and indie bookstores have entered into the chat.
Right. And what I was telling to someone the other day is that I feel like prior to BookTok, I only ever heard about books via like Oprah Magazine and like Good Morning America and like, these kind of, I don't call it a highbrow, but like, there'd be like articles published. And
yeah, it's like NPR.
Find out about things. Right.
Yeah.
And what I think BookTok has really done and done well is that it's given us the opportunity to get recommendations from our peers and from people our age and from our own life experiences. We're not necessarily getting our book recommendations from the New York Times. We're getting our recommendations from another lesbian. And I think that's where BookTok has really thrived, that we've been able to form community.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to note that for those who are listening who don't know, I started Epic Reads for HarperCollins many years ago. I no longer work for Harper, and I left back in very end of 2017. But the publishers and like the discussion of books on social was so heavily dominated by YA. Partially, I think because of Epic Reads, but also just that was where YA was so huge, and it still is so huge, especially on social. But you're right in that, like, before that, in order to find an adult book recommendation, like I had to go like literally Googling for recommendations, But now I think like I go to BookTok when I want an adult book recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And like, I think I'm kind of at a unique place where I can see kind of both worlds in terms of the influencer world and the bookseller world, because I have a little bit of a foot in both, and I came into both at the same time. It all happened at the same time for me. So it's very interesting to see. Sometimes I think it's funny when publishers are like so obviously trying to push a book really hard to booksellers, and then it's nowhere on TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name any names with that, but there's been a couple of adult fantasy books that have come out recently that we got like 4 arcs for at the store. And I got like a newsletter and a couple emails, and they're obviously pushing it. And I've literally not seen one TikTok about it.
Yeah. From a publisher's standpoint, You're probably getting multiple arcs because the salesperson sent one, the publicist probably sent one, the social media person probably sent one, and the marketing person sent one, or the author sent one, and they didn't really coordinate because 4 arcs to one store seems like a lot. Yeah.
We were like, ooh, okay, they're really pushing this one. All right.
Oh, by the way, for people listening, if you don't know what ARC stands for, it stands for Advanced Reader Copy. It's like an early uncorrected proof that publishers will send to bookstores in consideration for review.
Mm-hmm. And we get them typically about 6 to 8 months in advance. And the reason why booksellers get ARCs is so that we can nominate it for the Indie Next List. And there's like a specific deadline for that. And we have to read it and review it before that deadline in order for it to make the Indie Next List.
Oh, I have deep cut thoughts on the Indie Next List. Mostly that it's just having had worked at HarperCollins for 5 years, and then I just finished up 4 years at an independent comic book publisher. They charge the same amount to do the Indie Next List, like the same price for whether or not you're at a big 5 or you're at an indie publisher. And that's really hard for indie publishers to play in the sandbox when they obviously don't have the same deep pockets that the big 5 have. So I have a lot of frustrations with the Indie Next List because it's such a great program. It's how a lot of debut authors sort of make their name in the world. I was really hoping that Fresh would make the Indie Next List, but Fresh was published by Abrams, which is not a big 5. And so publishers nominate titles. They submit titles to all these independent bookstores, and they're like, please, sir, please nominate this book for the Indie Next List. And if the book does get nominated for the Indie Next List and then it's chosen for the Indie Next List, it gets all of this promotional marketing and also a lot, most of the independent bookstores, they display that book right in front and center right when you walk into the store. So it's like prime placement.
Yeah. And honestly, as a bookseller, we use the Indie Next List because we get like a little pamphlet of all the people who made it to the Indie Next List with a little bookseller blurb, an independent bookseller blurb on it. And like every time we get the new Indie Next List catalog, I will flip through it and, be like, oh, well, that's who made it this month. Oh, that's what so-and-so has to say about it. And it helps me do my job better. So I don't want to call it like, a huge deal, but it is a big deal.
It's a pretty big deal, and it helps boost orders with the indies, and it's a great program. I just wish that it was, a bit more affordable for indie publishers.
Yeah. I have to say, my always biggest complaint with the Indie Next List is that the deadline is so early to nominate, and like at least 4 times in the last 3 months or so, I've finished a book just after the indie deadline that I read it, and then I just recently read and loved The City of Dusk by Tara Sim, which is an adult high fantasy. I like to pitch it as a group of all queer disasters who are doing their worst at trying to save their world, and it's hysterical.
Oh my God, that sounds awesome.
It's so good. And I literally finished the book the day after the indie deadline. And I didn't realize that I was late for it. Otherwise, I would have reviewed it. It's so good. Everyone should read it. So at publishing, please, sir, make the deadline a little bit closer to pub day.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
What is harder, book selling or book talking?
Book talking, 100%.
Why?
That's an immediate, because when you're book selling in person, a lot of the books that I'm selling, I have not read, or I don't particularly care for, or I'm like, I've heard good things about this. And so you're working with the stock you have at the store. And a lot of the times, the best way you can sell a book to someone is pulling it off the shelf, saying, I've heard something really good about this, putting it in their hands and let them read the description. And then they're like, oh yeah, this does sound really good. And a couple weeks ago, I had a couple of teens come in and they walked up to me and said, hi, do you have any sapphic YA books? And I said, oh, do I? And I pulled an entire stack off the shelf, and I kind of blurbed a few here and there, but I kind of just put it in their hands and they made choices. Like book selling, the shelves are right in front of you. If someone says, I'm looking for historical fantasy, you can just turn and look at the shelf and it's done. But BookTok, you really do have to like turn on the personality, and you really have to like have the energy to get excited about a book, because the videos I've done where, you know, I'm just kind of like, okay, that was a good book and I really enjoyed it and that was fun. You know, they don't do as well as when I'm like, oh my God, that was the best book I've ever read in my whole life. And those videos take so much energy.
I'm really glad to hear that because that's how it was with Epic Reads. I was doing all these YouTube videos because I was back at part of the BookTube era, and
right.
Oh man, those videos would take everything out of me.
They take so much effort, and like I really do enjoy book talking, but like I think that's kind of where originally It's Gay and It Slaps came from. It was like, I don't want to have to give you a whole paragraph about why it was good. Like, it was gay and it slapped. I don't know. And book talking is so fickle, and it's so like, you know, the videos you put zero effort into do the best, and the videos that you spend half an hour on flop. But book selling, you're physical, you're there in person. And for me, it's a lot easier to just like talk to someone face to face.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to get a customer, you know, if you hand them a book and you're like, here, see if you'll be interested in this. Have you ever told them to do the 69 test?
The what?
Okay. Bear with me here. So many years ago, Harvard came out with this article about how they figured it out that in order to determine whether or not you would like a book or not, all you would have to read is page 69. I know. It's funny that they said 69, and I'm like, this is all in all seriousness. And of course, they didn't make a single joke about it, but I was like, haha, 69. But apparently by page 69, enough of the beginning laying the groundwork for the story has happened, and that, you know, the plot is developing and rising, the action is rising, that by 69, like, enough should be going on that if you like what you read on page 69, chances are you'll like the rest of the book.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. And I find that really fascinating. So now that's what I do whenever I go to the bookstore and I can't tell if I'm going to like a book or not, because I've learned not to trust the back copy of things. Having worked in marketing and book publishing marketing for so long, sometimes the back descriptions are so good, but the book doesn't match. Or conversely, the back copy is not doing the book justice at all, and the book is actually really, really great. So
I love that. I think I have the flip side 69 test, where if I am debating whether or not I want to read a romance book, I will flip it open to a sex scene and read it. And if it's a good scene, I'll buy the book. And if it's not, I'm like, I'm not going to waste my time on this.
So it's the actual 69 test then, not page 69.
Right. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to, read 3/4 of a book just to have a mediocre sex scene. Like, okay, if we're going to do this, let's do it right.
Yeah, I really like that test, and I really hope that more people find out about it through this podcast.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like selling people on books face-to-face is so much easier than BookTok, where it's like you have to have high energy and, the right transitions and the right filters and the right audio and like this, that, and the other thing that like even books that I really love and I push really well on my page, they don't always do as well as like, if I'm talking about like a new book that no one's really heard about versus a book that like everybody and their mother has posted about on TikTok.
Well, it's also interesting because when you're hand selling to somebody in a bookstore, you can know whether or not it worked because they'll go buy it.
Right.
Whereas on BookTok, like, sure, you may get the views, but did that actually boost sales? Like, you don't know.
Well, I actually do know, Margot.
Did you just actually me?
I sure did, buddy.
Tell me more. Educate me.
What is really interesting about being a bookseller at an independent bookstore and being on TikTok is that we actually have been able to use TikTok as a way to boost sales and to promote pre-order campaigns. And, I remember back before the holiday season, I made a video that was like, there's going to be a book shortage. Here are some books to pre-order because the holidays and the supply chain. And at the end of the video, I recommended people to shop at East City Bookshop. And we had 50 orders come in that day.
That's awesome. That makes me so happy.
I've really been able to see the physical effects of pre-order campaigns and promoting it on TikTok. I had 6 months to work with the If This Gets Out pre-order campaign. If This Gets Out by Sophie Gonzalez and Cale Dietrich, which is a boy band romance. It's YA. It's fantastic. And I had 6 months to promote that on my TikTok, and we had over 300 pre-orders. So,
See, that's actually, this is why I love that booksellers are now all over BookTok, because you can directly see that. Whereas if a publisher is going out there and being like, pre-order this book, and they don't give a specific place to pre-order, that data is so hard to track. And you're like, I actually don't know if it increased sales or not. You'll never know.
Right. Right. And that's what I love, honestly, about being an independent bookseller on TikTok. I really do get to use it as a chance to promote the store that I love and I work really hard for. And we get to I did a pre-order campaign for Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly, which is a cooking show romance with a non-binary main character. And it was a debut romance novel, and we had over 100 pre-orders for it because I got to promote it on TikTok, and that was such a joy and a delight to see the physical effects of BookTok and get to promote this book that I really loved. And it's just really cool to see the physical effects.
I love that. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, and I really enjoy seeing the bookstore accounts on TikTok and the way that they get to use it to promote the store. And we've had lots of conversations at my store about what is the role of TikTok and what is the point of us doing this? And for us, it's been kind of we just kind of want people to know that we're here and, let them kind of figure out the rest of it. And there's some stores that have great book recommendations, like A Novel Neighbor, and some bookstores that have just hilarious, funny videos, like Print a Bookstore, that you're like, wow, I really like these people. They're really cool. And I would hang out with them. So I love TikTok.
I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, as a consumer of TikTok videos, I really enjoy watching everybody's TikToks. As an author, I have found that I don't necessarily want to be an author on TikTok, which is so surprising to me because having been a person who built social media platforms for publishers the majority of my career, I thought when I published my own book that I would be all over social and all this stuff. Turns out I'm way better at selling other people's books than my own book.
Right. It's totally different.
Yeah. Promoting my own book feels weird, and not icky weird, just I'm so sick of it because I wrote it. I've been working on this book since 2018. I am tired, you know, but also the exposure on TikTok is so much different than what I'm used to. Cause back in my day, building up a YouTube platform would take years and years and years. Whereas on TikTok, you have one viral video and boom, you have all of these followers.
You can explode overnight.
It was overwhelming for me. And then there's always the question of am I on TikTok as an author, or am I on TikTok as a publishing person, or am I on TikTok as just me, myself, outside of those two identities? But I couldn't really decide. So I just ended up doing nothing. I mean, I tried. And then I was like, actually, you know what? I think I'm just going to observe because I feel more comfortable letting the community and the readers and the booksellers talk about my book as opposed to me talking about my book, because I think some authors are really, really good at it. And, they really get into the trends and doing all those fun videos and stuff. But I am a person who gets very sucked into social media very, very quickly and easily because I used to run those things professionally. So I'd have to pay attention to stats and I would get competitive with it and I would get super hyper focused on it. But I find that I just don't have the time for that anymore. And I don't know how to do things in moderation. So it's either all in or nothing. So it was easier for me to just go, nothing.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm glad that you were on it for the brief period that you were so that we could meet. But I totally hear and understand what you're saying.
Yeah, a lot of authors still come to me, with questions about self-promotion and marketing. And I'm doing an upcoming SCBWI event on marketing for authors. And the most common question I get is that, how do you do social media? Like, how do I get a lot of followers? And my first question to every single author is, do you want to do this? Because I think that's an important question that a lot of authors need to answer before they start down that road. Because if they don't want to do this, then they shouldn't do it. Like, they should only be doing social media if it's something that they enjoy. It brings them joy. It's like the Marie Kondo thing, If it does not bring you joy, don't do it. So it's funny. A lot of people, I feel like people come to me to give them permission to not do social media. And I love giving people permission to not do social media. First of all, if you don't like it, it becomes really obvious. And your videos and stuff will be super cringe. And I felt like my videos were being super cringe, which was why I was like, no, I'm out. So I would much rather do a podcast like this than TikTok. Though don't get me wrong, every couple of nights, I'll have a few drinks and I'll be like, let's TikTok. And then I'll like randomly appear again. And then I disappear for like another 6 months. If there's any wisdom I gained from the years of YouTubing, it's that to take breaks. If you're one of those people you're listening to this, and you, Laynie, if you're listening to this and you are a BookTok person, and burnout is real also for social media, it's not just a work thing. People should take breaks and don't feel bad about it. Like, I know the problem with social media is that we've become so obsessed with the algorithm and worrying that we're not going to be relevant and things like that. But I think mental health is more important than relevancy. So make sure that you take breaks and stuff, because it can get tiresome after, many years of doing those things. So
agreed. And
please
what I
take
always
care.
tell people about like TikTok and like in the book world in general is to like have a life outside of being a book person. The best advice I've ever received in my entire life was when I worked in theater. And I was like 18, a college freshman, and my mentor said, make sure you're a person before you're a theater person, because this is just a job, and you need to make sure that you have a life outside of that. And I feel like that's the approach that I've really taken to the book world, is that like I really let myself have my my fandom things and my Supernatural, the TV show, and I really let myself have time to just obsess over TV shows and to go to museums and to hang out with my friends. And I don't let my entire life just be about books. And I think that's important for anyone, especially on BookTok, that so much of the burnout I see is because it's the only thing they really let themselves focus on, which it can be an escape, but I really encourage everyone, both booksellers and BookTokkers and publishing people alike, to let yourself take breaks from the book world and to just be a person.
That's a very good and wholesome message. Actually, you know what? I know you mentioned Supernatural. I've never actually seen Supernatural. And you post a lot about it on Twitter.
I post a lot about it.
I don't know what it is. Like, okay. Based on my limited knowledge, here's what I think Supernatural is, based solely on your tweets.
I'm so excited about this.
It is two, okay, I don't know if they're brothers or they're lovers, but there's two dudes, and they have a car that's old that is for some reason in every scene. And they fight demons? No, not vampires, but like spirit things? I don't know. And that's it. That's all I know.
Okay, so it's technically 3 dudes,
What?
2 of which are brothers.
Okay, I got one thing right.
Sam and Dean. And then the other 2, Castiel and Dean, they're not lovers because the CW is homophobic, but there is the 12-year-long queer bait that is frequently referred to as the last great American queer bait. So you weren't entirely wrong.
Okay, all right.
So basically the plot is that like these 2 brothers, Sam and Dean, were raised in this hunting world where they have to hunt monsters. And then throughout the course of 15 seasons, it goes from being like 2 brothers on the road in the Plain States in their dad's Impala, trying to find their dad and doing the best to hunt monsters along the way, to 15 years later, this story that has angels and demons and gods and monsters, and these two men, Castiel and Dean, who raise a child together and have a very close friendship that one might say they're in love, and the showrunners would say, if you say that again, we'll kill off Castiel again. So it's kind of the definition of queer baiting, where for 12 years they were like, oh, here's this angel character that has a very close relationship with Dean. It's this whole thing.
I find that interesting because it sounds like it's just boy version of Buffy, but Buffy also had a like openly queer character with Willow.
You're so right about that, Bestie.
And they were on the same network. So like, why? I don't understand.
It's interesting because the main character Dean, they've like kind of expected him to be the definition of like masculinity in the American man, and like, you know, oh, he's slept with so many women and this, that, the other thing, but we can't admit that he's bisexual and is in love with his best friend. What? No, we can't do that because he's the big American man. So it's this whole thing, and it's like really kind of gross the way the network has handled it, but it's a whole thing. I recommend watching Supernatural if you would like to be furious all the time. Is it
scary? Because I don't like scary things.
It is a little scary. It's kind of gory at times too.
So like in the romance book community, the word spice is used to denote levels of sexiness in a book. Is there an equivalent for levels of scariness?
I feel like I wouldn't know about that because I don't like scary things either.
Yeah, is it screams? But there needs to be a fun, catchy, cute word, you know, that's like spice, you know, but it's like, throats slashed? Like, what is it?
Right. Because I feel like with romance, I feel like there's a difference between books that are steamy and books that are spicy. You know, books that are steamy, you're like, okay, it's a little closed door. It's a little just kind of like, ooh, we're talking about this. And then spicy is like, okay, the door's open. The door's wide open.
I think the difference between those two would be the difference between being horny and like acting on the horniness.
That is so correct. Very much so.
Because a couple of people on BookTok or Instagram or one of those, you know, listed my book Fresh as like a level 4 spice. You know, this is on a level of 1 to 5. And I thought that was really interesting because in Fresh, yes, there are sex scenes, but they're not actually in the service of like horniness. They're usually in the service of comedy. And so they're explicit, but not erotic, which is why I was like, this book is not spicy from a erotic standpoint. It's just explicit because, you know, it goes there with scenes and talks about the realities of hooking up when you're a freshman in college and have no idea what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. No, that does surprise me also. Well, it's so funny. Sometimes, you know, I'll read a romance book that is a little steamy, and then I'll hand that book off to someone who has never read a romance book before at all. And they're like, oh, wow, that's so spicy. And I'm like, well, unless you've read Katie Robert, I feel like it's not really.
Yeah, I guess maybe then as a bookseller, you could ask somebody just what TV show do you think is spicy? Because then if they say something like, I don't know, Euphoria versus like Pride and Prejudice, you know, there's different levels.
Right. I feel like what's really interesting about people who come into the bookstore specifically looking for a spicy romance, they're not afraid to admit it. They're not afraid to walk up, be like, where's one with some spice in it? You're like, oh, I got you. We can absolutely make that happen. Versus people who come in and like, you'll be like, okay, what are you looking for in a romance? And they're like, something wholesome, something without a whole lot of extra things in it. And they kind of dance around it. I'm like, all right, so no sex scenes, got it.
So a lot of longing, just like the longing versus
longing.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, people who come in looking for spice, they know what they're looking for. They're not afraid to admit it.
Man, it must be fun to be a bookseller.
That's fun.
The one aspect of my publishing life that that's the one area I've never done. I've never been a bookseller.
What I think I really enjoy the most about being a bookseller is that I'm not necessarily beholden to specific books like I would be if I worked at like a publishing company. Like I
Excuse
see all
me,
the
you
time.
should be beholden to my book.
Margot, I'm always beholden to you. You know you have my never-ending love. But I see, specifically, I'll see like publishers' TikToks that they make on their publishing account. And I'm like, wouldn't that suck if you worked for the publishing company and you hated that book, but you had to make TikToks about it?
Ooh,
Like,
yep, I've done that.
that would suck. And I think what's great about being a bookseller is that I'm not, specifically for one publishing company or for one author. Like I can kind of, if I don't like it, I can just put it down and I don't have to really talk to people about it again.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people don't, I talk to a lot of college students because Fresh has said it, Emerson College is the story of a girl in her freshman year and, all of the wild abandon that freshmen go into. But I talk to a lot of college students and a lot of these college students are like, oh, I dream about working in publishing. And I'm like, okay, just so you know, you tend to work on a lot of books. Some of them you really enjoy and some of them you really, really don't enjoy. And you still have to provide the same quality of service on the ones you don't enjoy as the ones you do.
Right.
And that can be hard to do, especially if there's a book that goes against like what you morally and personally stand for, or you just don't like that genre. Right. There's like a lot of hurdles that you have to sort of get over in order to do what you need to do for those titles. I can't even imagine what it's like from an editor, like especially if one editor can acquire books but not necessarily edit that book, especially if they leave the house and change jobs or whatever. So a lot of editors will inherit books that they didn't even show interest in originally. And that's got to be so difficult, that has to be so hard, especially if you're somebody who's like, I hate horror. And then all of a sudden you have all these spoopy books on your desk that you have to now edit. Like that must be very, very difficult for editors. I think on the marketing side and the sales side, I don't know, I've gotten to a place where I'm pretty good at, I feel comfortable being able to talk about things that I'm not personally into. Right. Because there's a reader for every single book. It may not be me, that just because I didn't like a book doesn't mean that everybody isn't going to like that book, So
exactly.
It's finding the merits of the book and trying to be able to talk about those books. Like how you said earlier, you're like, well, you didn't really like it, but I've heard these good things, or I know fans of this will like it.
Right. And honestly, that's why I don't really want to go into publishing. Like, I kind of made a pretty severe career switch from being a stage manager in theater to being a bookseller. And a lot of my friends will ask me like, oh, what's next for you? Like, do you want to go into publishing? And I'm like, there is no next for me at the moment. I'm very happy in my little bookstore with my silly little task, and I sweep the silly little stairs and I pick arcs off the shelf, and if I don't like a book, I don't ever have to talk about it again. And it's pretty sweet. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. But it looks like we're running out of time. So, Laynie, where can people find you?
You can find me if you are in the Washington, D.C. area at East City Bookshop. We're just a few blocks away from the Library of Congress and from the U.S. Capitol building. And on social media, you can find me at the Laynie Rose across all my social media handles, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Where can people find you, Margot?
On Venmo at Margot. People can find me on Twitter at Margot Wood, Instagram at Margot M Wood, because I screwed it up the first time and lost the original Margot Wood, and I can never get it back. So Margot M Wood on Instagram, and I am on TikTok at Margot Wood, but don't follow me if you're expecting regular content.
Incredible. Well, I've had such a lovely time talking to you. I mean, we talk all the time, but it's fun to talk like this that I'm like, ooh, we're so fancy in a podcast.
I want to thank Nicole for having us. This has been a very lovely time chatting with you.
So lovely. And thank everyone for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed our silly little talks back and forth.
I know. If you made it all the way this far, I'm impressed.
If you've made it all the way this far, it's probably my mom. Hi, Mom. I love you.
Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to Laynie and Margot for taking the time for that glorious conversation. Like I said, we'll be back in a few weeks for our season 4, which will be our final season for now. But if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review it on all of your various platforms. Don't forget to follow us on whatever social media you like, and, share it with a friend if you are so inclined. We'll be back soon, and until then, happy reading.